The Myrtles Plantation. I didn't go to the Myrtles Plantation because I believed it was haunted. I went because I was tired of hearing other people talk about it like it was a punchline. I'd lived in Louisiana long enough to know the way haunted stories work there. You can't buy gas or coffee or a po' boy without someone mentioning a house where the lights move on their own, or a road where you shouldn't stop at night. It's woven into the culture so tightly that people tell ghost stories the way they talk about the weather. Half serious, half casual, like it's just another thing you learn to live with. And the Myrtles wasn't just a story. It was a brand. A grand old plantation home with creaking floors and Spanish moss hanging in the trees like gray hair. A place that sold tickets, hosted weddings, served breakfast, and promised you might see a woman in a green turban if you looked at the mirrors long enough. Every time I heard it, the same details came up. A poisoning, a slave girl named Chloe, children dead, a curse, a mirror that holds faces that never leave, a staircase where something sits and watches. It sounded like the kind of haunting designed to sell postcards. So when my friend Mariah told me she'd booked us 2 nights there, just to get away, just to breathe, just to see for ourselves, I laughed in her face. "You booked the most haunted plantation in America for relaxation," I said. Mariah shrugged, unbothered. "It's beautiful," she replied. "And you're always saying you want to write something set somewhere real. Consider it research." I had been talking about writing a long-form series for my channel projects, so something southern and slow and heavy with atmosphere. I'd been saying it so long, it had become a promise. Research was a good excuse. But if I'm honest, I also went because of something else. The older I got, the more I noticed a pattern in my own life. The things I laughed at had a way of biting back. We drove in late afternoon, the kind of day where the sky looks too bright to hold anything dark. The road to St. Francisville rolled through trees that leaned in close, branches knitting overhead in places until the sunlight came through in thin, broken strips. When we turned onto the plantation driveway, the air changed. I can't explain it any better than that. The temperature didn't drop dramatically. The sun didn't vanish. Nothing obvious happened, but the air felt held, like the land was keeping its breath. The Myrtles sat back from the road behind a curtain of trees and hanging moss. White columns, wide veranda, dark shutters. A house that looked like it had grown into its own myth and learned to enjoy it. The property was quiet, but not empty. A couple walked along the path, taking pictures. A staff member carried fresh linens into a side building. A golf cart moved slowly near the parking area. Normal activity, normal sounds. And still, the place didn't feel normal. Mariah was delighted the moment we stepped out of the car. "Look at this," she whispered, like we'd arrived at something holy. She raised her phone, snapping photos of the moss, the porch, the windows. The windows bothered me, not because they were dark, because they looked like eyes that didn't blink. We checked in at the front desk inside the house. The interior smelled like old wood and furniture polish, with something sweet beneath it, like wilted flowers left in a vase too long. The floorboards creaked in a way that didn't sound like weakness. It sounded like acknowledgement. The woman at the desk was polite but practiced. She had the calm expression of someone who had answered 1,000 questions about ghosts and didn't want to encourage people to do anything stupid. "You're in the Clark room," she told Mariah, handing over a key. "Second floor, toward the back." "And the ghost tour?" Mariah asked, excited. "Tonight at 8, the woman replied. "Please be on the porch 10 minutes early." Mariah nodded, then hesitated. "Do you personally think it's haunted?" The woman's smile tightened slightly. She glanced toward the hallway, then back at us. "I think," she said carefully, "that this house has a lot of history. People leave things behind. Sometimes it feels like they don't want to be forgotten." It wasn't an answer. It was worse than an answer. We carried our bags upstairs. The staircase was wide, the banister smooth with age. I ran my fingers along the wood without thinking and felt something like a vibration, as if the house had its own pulse beneath the surface. Halfway up, I noticed a mirror on the landing. Not a modern, decorative mirror. An old one, framed in dark wood, the glass slightly wavy. It caught the light from a window and threw it back in a way that made the hallway behind me look deeper than it should. Mariah stopped to look at herself and laughed. "This place is so pretty," she said. I didn't answer. In the mirror, the reflection of the hallway looked off. Not wrong enough to point to, just wrong enough that my eyes kept checking it. Our room was at the end of a narrow hall where the air felt cooler. The door opened with a soft groan. Inside, the room was dim, curtains half drawn, sunlight filtering through lace and making pale patterns on the floor. The bed was old and tall, carved wood, clean linens. The furniture looked antique, but cared for. A small desk, a rocking chair near the window, a wardrobe, and on the wall facing the bed, a mirror, large, oval, dark framed. Mariah clapped her hands. "We got a spooky mirror," she said, laughing. I forced a smile. "Great." She dropped her bag and began exploring the room like a kid. "Look at the ceiling," she said. "Look at these floors. You can feel how old it is." I could feel it, yes, but not in the way she meant. I felt watched, not by eyes, by attention, like the room itself was aware of us, and it didn't care whether we believed in it or not. We unpacked, then walked the grounds before the tour. The sun was lower now, the trees throwing longer shadows. Spanish moss swayed slightly even when the air seemed still. Somewhere on the property, a bird called out, then went quiet abruptly, like it had remembered where it was. We wandered near the gardens and the path that led toward the small pond. Mariah read the plaques aloud, bits of history about ownership, renovations, and stories that had become part of the tourist experience. She kept saying the same name with excitement. Chloe. "That's the famous one," she said. "The slave girl who wore the green turban because her ear got cut off, and then she poisoned the family." "Allegedly," I said. Mariah gave me a look. "Come on, don't ruin it." "I'm not ruining it," I replied. "I just don't like the way people package tragedy." Mariah's excitement dimmed a little. "It's still history," she said softly. "Yeah," I said, "and that's what makes it heavier." By the time we returned to the porch for the tour, the sky had turned orange and purple. The house looked even more dramatic in that light, the white columns pale against the deepening shadows. A small group gathered, couples, a few teenagers with nervous smiles, an older man with a professional camera. The tour guide was a tall woman with a calm voice and an expression that suggested she'd seen too much to laugh easily. She introduced herself and began telling the history in a way that was equal parts respectful and unsettling. She talked about the early owners, the wars, the sickness, the way death was not unusual in houses like this, not back then. Then she moved to the stories people came for. She led us inside and pointed out the famous mirror in the hallway, the one people said held the handprints and faces of children. "This mirror," she said, "has been photographed thousands of times." The glass was old, the surface slightly clouded. When I stepped closer, I saw faint marks, smudges that looked like fingertips. They were too high to be children's handprints unless someone lifted them. They were too deliberate to be random dirt. Mariah raised her phone. "Do you see anything?" she whispered. "I see fingerprints," I murmured. "From tourists," the guide continued. "People claim they've seen faces here," she said. "Not always, but often enough that it became part of the legend." A woman in the group asked, "Do you think it's Chloe?" The guide paused. "I think Chloe is complicated," she said carefully. "Some historians argue she never existed the way the story is told. But people like stories with villains. People like their hauntings to have neat explanations." The guide's words made my stomach tighten. I didn't like neat explanations either. The tour moved through rooms, each with its own story. Footsteps, voices, the smell of perfume, laughter where there should be none. I listened politely, half skeptical, half caught by the atmosphere. Then we reached the staircase. The guide placed a hand on the banister. "People often report something here," she said. "A presence, a feeling of being watched." I felt Mariah's arm brush mine. She was grinning, nervous excitement. I stood on the bottom step and looked up. For a moment, the top landing seemed darker than it should be. Not shadow dark, thick dark, like the light was being absorbed. Then I blinked and it looked normal again. We ended the tour back on the porch. People asked questions. The guide answered. The group dispersed slowly, laughing nervously. Mariah was thrilled. "Okay," she said, bouncing slightly. "We're staying up. We're doing photos. We're doing recordings." "We're not," I said quickly. She pouted. "We're not going ghost hunting, but we can just listen." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to refuse. Another part of me didn't want to be the boring one. And deep down, curiosity kept scratching. "Fine," I said, "but we don't provoke anything." Mariah nodded solemnly, like that was a vow. Back in our room, we turned on a small lamp and sat on the bed. The mirror faced us, reflecting the room at an angle. I tried not to look at it, but my eyes kept sliding there anyway, like I needed to know what it was showing. Mariah whispered, "This is so creepy." "It's just a mirror," I said. "Then why won't you look at it?" she asked. I forced myself to meet my own eyes in the reflection. For a second, everything was normal. Then my reflection blinked a fraction of a second after I did. It wasn't a big delay. It was subtle, enough to make my stomach drop. I leaned closer. The glass was wavy, old. That could explain it. "See?" I said too quickly. "Old glass." Mariah giggled. Okay. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the house. Creaks, soft settling sounds, the distant hum of something mechanical. At around 11 p.m., Mariah yawned. "I'm tired," she said. "This bed is too comfy." "Go to sleep," I said, relieved. She climbed under the covers and turned on her side, facing away from the mirror. Within minutes, her breathing deepened. I stayed awake longer, scrolling on my phone, trying to ground myself in normal light and normal content. But my attention kept drifting to the room around me, to the mirror, to the rocking chair near the window, still and silent. At 12:12, the rocking chair moved, just once, a small creak as the wood shifted. I looked up sharply, heart racing. The chair was still. I stared until my eyes ached. Nothing moved. Then the chair creaked again. This time, the rocker shifted forward a fraction of an inch, then back. I sat up slowly. "Mariah," I whispered. She didn't wake. The chair rocked again, very gently, as if someone had placed their weight into it and was testing its balance. The lamp on the bedside table flickered once. My throat went dry. I looked toward the window. The curtains were still. No wind. The chair rocked again. And in the mirror, I saw it clearly. A faint impression in the chair, as if someone invisible was sitting there. Not a full body, just a slight dip, like an invisible weight. I held my breath. The chair creaked softly, and then, slowly, it turned, just a few degrees, so it faced the bed more directly, as if whoever was in it wanted to watch us sleep. I couldn't move. My mind tried to scramble for explanation. Old floor, uneven weight, so thermal expansion. Anything. But the chair had changed direction. That was intent. I glanced at Mariah. She slept, unaware, her face relaxed. I turned back to the chair. The rocking stopped. Silence returned so suddenly it felt like a door had closed. I exhaled shakily and forced myself to lie back down. I kept my eyes open. I stared at the ceiling. I refused to look at the mirror again. Minutes passed. My heart slowed. Then, from the hallway outside our door, came a sound I recognized from the night before in the rental. Soft tapping, not random, patterned. 3 taps, a pause, 2 taps. I sat up again, every muscle tense. Tap, 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 a pause, tap, tap. The tapping stopped. Then, very softly, a voice whispered through the door. Not loud enough to understand the words, but unmistakably a voice. Mariah's breathing shifted. She murmured in her sleep, then settled again. The whisper came again, closer. I stared at the door, my hands clenched in the blanket. The doorknob turned slightly, as if someone on the other side was testing it. It didn't open. The knob released. Silence. I waited, not breathing, not blinking. Then, right beside my ear, inside the room, something exhaled. A slow, gentle breath. Not Mariah's, not mine. I turned my head an inch, just enough to see the mirror without moving fully. In the mirror, the bed looked longer than it should. The shadow beneath it looked darker. And at the edge of the reflection, near the foot of the bed, a figure stood. Not clear, not detailed, just the suggestion of a person. Still, watching. My entire body went cold. I tried to swallow and couldn't. The figure didn't move. It just remained there, patient, like it had all night and all history to wait. Then the whisper came again, not from the hallway, not from the door, from inside the room, soft as a thought. Don't tell her. My breath caught so hard it hurt, because the voice was not angry, not threatening. It sounded almost amused, and it sounded like it already knew my name. I didn't wake Mariah, not because I believed the voice, not because I trusted it, not because I wanted to keep some secret like it was a gift. I didn't wake her because my throat had locked up and my body refused to move, as if the air itself had thickened around the bed. The figure in the mirror stayed where it was, near the foot of the bed, just inside the frame of the reflection, not fully formed, but unmistakably human in shape. It didn't sway or blur like a trick of old glass. It didn't shift like a shadow from passing headlights. It held still with the calm of something that had practiced stillness for a long time. I stared until my eyes burned. "Don't tell her," the voice repeated, softer this time, as if it was leaning closer to my ear. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to turn my head. My pulse hammered in my wrists. I could hear my own heartbeat more loudly than the house. I tried to breathe quietly through my nose so Mariah wouldn't stir. The rocking chair creaked once, very close. Not across the room anymore. Close enough that I felt it in the mattress, a subtle vibration through the floorboards. In the mirror, the chair's position hadn't changed. It still sat near the window. And yet the creak sounded as if it came from just behind the headboard. My skin prickled so hard it hurt. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, then opened them again, forcing myself to look at the real room instead of the mirror. Nothing had changed. The lamp still glowed. The curtains hung still. Mariah slept on her side, hair spread across the pillow like nothing could touch her. The air smelled faintly sweet and old, like flowers left too long in water. I turned my eyes back to the mirror. The figure was closer, not by a full step, just nearer. Enough that the distance between it and the bed looked wrong. I couldn't prove it had moved, but my body knew it had. The voice didn't speak again. It didn't need to. The silence was its own pressure. I forced myself to sit up slowly, like I was trying not to scare a wild animal. The mattress shifted under Mariah's weight, but she didn't wake. I swung my feet to the floor carefully, keeping my gaze low. I didn't look directly at the mirror as I stood, but in the corner of my vision, I saw the figure's outline sharpen as if it liked that I was standing. I moved toward the bathroom with small, quiet steps, telling myself I needed water, needed to splash my face, needed to ground myself in something normal. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to grip the edge of the dresser to steady myself. The moment I touched the wood, I felt a faint vibration beneath it, like a phone on silent, like a pulse traveling through the house. I froze. Then the vibration stopped, as if it had noticed I noticed. I reached the bathroom and shut the door softly behind me. The bathroom was darker than the bedroom. No window, only the thin light from the lamp bleeding in under the door. The mirror above the sink was small, modern, and yet it felt like the most dangerous thing in the room. I kept my eyes down and turned on the faucet. The water sputtered, then ran, cold and steady. As I cupped it in my hands, the temperature made me flinch. It was colder than it should have been, like it had been sitting in stone. I splashed my face. For a moment, it helped. The sting of cold water, the sound of running, the physical sensation of something real. I breathed in slowly, exhaled. Then, from the other side of the bathroom door, came a soft tap. One knock, not a pounding, not an urgent rattle, a polite knock. I froze, hands dripping. Another knock followed, exactly the same pressure, the same tempo, like someone knocking on a neighbor's door to borrow sugar. My mouth went dry. I backed away from the door without thinking, shoulders hitting the tile wall. The knock came again. Then, after a pause, the faintest whisper seeped through the crack at the bottom of the door. "Not her!" The words slid through like a draft. My stomach lurched. I pressed my palm against my mouth to stop myself from making a sound. I listened. Silence. Then the doorknob turned slowly, testing. I stared at it, heart slamming. The lock on this bathroom door was old, simple, a little button in the knob. I had not locked it. The knob turned again, and this time the door moved a fraction of an inch inward. I stepped forward and shoved it shut with both hands, shaking. Then I locked it. The knob jiggled once, as if someone on the other side had noticed the change and didn't appreciate it. The voice came again, closer now, was soft as breath against wood. "You don't want to wake her." It wasn't a question. It was a statement spoken with confidence, like it knew me better than I knew myself. My entire body felt icy. "Leave us alone," I whispered, the words barely forming. A pause, then a sound like a quiet laugh, dry, small, amused. "Alone?" it repeated, tasting the word. "In this house?" The knob stopped moving. The silence after was worse. It felt like someone standing on the other side of the door, still and patient, listening to my breathing. I stood there, palms pressed against the door, refusing to move. refusing to give the impression of surrender. My arms started to ache. My hands went numb. Then, suddenly, everything on the other side went quiet. Not normal quiet, empty quiet. The kind you hear after a storm passes and you realize how loud the wind had been. I waited a full minute. 2. No knocks, no whispers. Finally, I unlocked the door and opened it a crack. The bedroom was exactly as it had been. Mariah slept. The lamp glowed. The rocking chair sat near the window, motionless. And the mirror, our room's large oval mirror, reflected the bed. The figure was gone. I stood there breathing shallowly, waiting for my eyes to adjust, waiting for my brain to catch up. I stepped back into the bedroom quietly. The floor creaked once under my weight, and I flinched, expecting a response. None came. I returned to the bed and slid under the covers carefully, facing away from the mirror, my back to Mariah like a shield I didn't deserve to use. I didn't sleep. Morning arrived slowly, turning the curtains pale gold, and when the light finally filled the room enough to feel safe, I heard Mariah stretch and yawn. "Wow," she murmured sleepily. "Best sleep ever." I stared at the ceiling. "You okay?" she asked, turning to look at me. I forced my face to move into something neutral. "Yeah," I said. "Just couldn't sleep." Mariah smiled. "Because you were scared," she teased gently. I didn't answer. We went downstairs for breakfast, a small spread served in a dining area that looked like it belonged to another century. Wooden tables, antique decor, staff moving quietly like they didn't want to disturb the air. Tourists chatted in low voices. People laughed softly. The normal world. Mariah poured coffee and sighed. "I love this place," she said. "It feels peaceful." I almost laughed. Well, the word peaceful felt wrong in my mouth. Across the room, a woman in a staff uniform caught my eye. Not the front desk woman from yesterday, someone older, with tired eyes that looked like they'd been holding secrets a long time. She watched me for a moment, then looked away quickly, like she hadn't meant to. I took my coffee and walked past her intentionally, pretending I was just stretching my legs. "Excuse me?" I said quietly. "Can I ask you something?" She paused. Her gaze flicked to Mariah, then back to me. "About last night," I added. Her mouth tightened. "You're in the Clark room," she said softly. It wasn't a question. "Yes." She hesitated, then leaned closer just enough that no one else could hear. "Did you see it in the mirror?" she asked. My stomach dropped. Yes." Her eyes closed briefly. "It likes mirrors," she said. "Not because it's trapped. Because it can stand where you won't look." My throat felt tight. "What is it?" She didn't answer directly. She glanced around the dining room, then lowered her voice further. "People come here and repeat the story they want," she said. "They want Chloe. They want a villain. They want a curse with a name and a costume. But this house is older than the stories they sell." I stared at her. She continued, careful. "There's a way the past sits in a place like this," she said. "Not like a memory, like a weight. And when people gather around it and point at it and laugh, it notices. It presses back." I swallowed hard. It spoke to me. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that. "What did it say?" she asked. I hesitated, then admitted. "It told me not to tell her." The woman's face changed. Not surprise, concern. "It chooses," she whispered. "It always chooses someone." "What happens if it chooses you?" I asked. Her eyes flicked up to the staircase leading to the second floor. "Then you leave," she said simply. And you don't take souvenirs. You don't take pictures. You don't take pieces of the story. I thought of Mariah's phone full of photos, the videos she'd recorded on the porch, the audio. My stomach sank. I think she recorded the tour, I said quietly. The woman's gaze sharpened. Delete it, she said immediately. All of it. Why? I asked. She swallowed. Because if it can follow attention, she said, it can follow what attention creates. I stared at her, trying to understand. She leaned closer again. People think hauntings are tied to places, she whispered. But some things aren't tied to places. They're tied to being remembered. I returned to the table with my coffee, trying to keep my face calm. Mariah was happily scrolling through her photos. Look, she said, turning her phone toward me. This one is so creepy. The mirror? Do you see that smudge? It looks like a face. My stomach clenched. Mariah, I said softly, can you delete the videos from last night? She blinked. Why? Just, please, I said. I don't want them. Mariah laughed nervously. Are you actually scared? I forced my voice steady. I'm serious. Her smile faded a little. Okay, she said, still amused but uncertain. Sure. She tapped her screen, deleting clips. There, happy? I watched her carefully. Empty the trash, I said. Like permanently delete. She frowned. Why are you being so intense? I hesitated, then chose the safest version of the truth. I think this place messes with people, I said. I don't want to bring that home. Mariah rolled her eyes, but did it anyway. Fine, she said. All gone. I didn't feel relief. I felt watched. That afternoon, we walked the grounds again, but the beauty felt thinner now. Spanish moss swayed like hair on a dead thing. The sun didn't warm the shade properly. The pond water looked darker than it should. Mariah tried to bring back the fun mood. Maybe we should do another tour, she said, or go see the cemetery nearby. No, I said too quickly. She sighed. You're ruining my haunted getaway. I stopped walking and turned to her. Mariah, I said, voice low. Something happened last night. Her smile faded fully. What happened? I hesitated, feeling that old pressure between my shoulders, the sense that telling would be punished, but I couldn't keep it in. I saw someone in the mirror, I said quietly, and it talked. Mariah stared at me for a long moment, then she laughed once, sharp. Okay, I'm not joking, I said. Her laugh died. She searched my face, realizing I wasn't playing. What did it say? She asked softly. I swallowed. It told me not to tell you? Mariah's eyes widened. That's... She stopped, suddenly uneasy. That's not funny? I know, I said. For the first time since we arrived, Mariah looked like she wanted to leave. We decided to check out early. We told the front desk we had a schedule change. The staff didn't question it. They never do. People come to the Myrtles expecting mystery. People leave with excuses. As we carried our bags down the staircase, I felt it again. That attention. I didn't look at the mirror on the landing, but I felt the space behind me press closer, like someone leaning in to listen. Mariah gripped her bag tighter. Can we just go? She whispered. We stepped out into the afternoon light and walked to the car. For the first time, I thought we might actually leave clean. Then Mariah stopped. What? I asked, impatient. She was staring back at the house. Her face had gone pale. Do you see that? She whispered. I turned. In the upstairs window of the Clark room, behind the lace curtain, a figure stood. Still, watching, not waving, not moving, just present. My stomach dropped. The curtain shifted slightly, though there was no wind. The figure remained in place, like a shadow anchored to glass. Mariah grabbed my arm hard. Someone's in our room, she hissed. No, I whispered, because I knew it wasn't a person. The figure leaned forward, just enough to darken the curtain fabric. Then, very slowly, the curtain drew back an inch. Not from wind, from fingers. I couldn't see the hand clearly, but I saw the motion. And then, in the glass, I saw something worse. Not the figure, our reflections. Me and Mariah standing at the car, staring up. And behind our reflections, behind us, another shape, tall and still, standing too close. I spun around so fast, my neck hurt. Empty parking area, empty driveway. No one behind us, but the pressure between my shoulder blades was immediate and heavy, like something had stepped into the space I'd just turned away from. Mariah let out a small, broken sound. "Get in the car," I said. We did. Calm movements. No screaming. No running. Running felt like permission. I started the engine. The moment I put the car in drive, the pressure eased slightly, but it didn't vanish. It rode with me like a memory too heavy to set down. We drove away. Down the mossy driveway, onto the road, past the trees that closed behind us like a curtain. Neither of us spoke for miles. When we reached a gas station outside town, I finally said, "Do you feel normal?" Mariah stared out the window. "No," she whispered. "Do you feel like something is close?" She nodded without looking at me. "Like I'm being watched," she said. "Like it's right behind my head." My throat went dry. "You didn't feel that before," I said. Mariah swallowed. "I didn't," she admitted. "But I do now." We drove home in silence, both of us sitting rigidly, unwilling to lean back fully into our seats. That night, back in my apartment, Mariah refused to look at mirrors. She avoided windows. She kept her back against walls. "I feel stupid," she whispered, "like I brought something home because I wanted a creepy weekend." I didn't correct her, because my own apartment felt wrong too. Not because something had moved, because the air felt held, just like it had at the Myrtles. At 12:12 a.m., the rocking chair in my living room creaked. I didn't own a rocking chair. Mariah's eyes snapped to mine. "What was that?" I swallowed hard. "Nothing," I lied. The creak came again, from the corner of the room where there was only empty space. Mariah began to cry silently, one hand over her mouth to muffle it. And then, from the darkened hallway, a whisper came, soft as breath, amused as ever. "You did tell her." The pressure between my shoulder blades returned, heavier than I'd ever felt it, not behind me, all around me, like the house itself had leaned in close. In the bathroom, the mirror caught a faint movement at its edge. I didn't look directly, but I saw enough. A shape standing where my reflection should have been alone. Still. Patient. Waiting. That was the moment I understood the woman at breakfast. It wasn't tied to the Myrtles. It was tied to being remembered. And now, we were remembering it. If you're listening to this and you ever visit a place like that, don't go looking for proof. Don't go looking for faces in mirrors. Because the worst hauntings aren't the ones that slam doors. The worst hauntings are the ones that follow you home quietly, like a shadow that doesn't need light to exist. If you enjoyed this story and want more long-form haunted tales, subscribe to American Haunted Tales. You have been listening to American Haunted Tales.
Thank you for watching.